HBARs. I'm excited because regular viewer of the show and legend in the NFT space on Hedera, Bones, has just called into the show. Bones, I'm gonna bring you up. Um, how are you doing, man? It's great to see you. What's new in your neck of the woods?
Just doing a lot of code and stuff, man. I just enjoying the show. Kind of nervous to be up here because I'm not really on on video as much, but I just thought I'd call in and say what's up. I did want to touch on like hashtags and things
Yeah,
like
please.
that. Um, I think hashtags is interesting because it's something that we're doing kind of unique on the network, and it was kind of weird that it was met with such hostility. I feel like, right?
Sure.
There seemed to be all this stuff, but I feel like if we're going to bring people onto Hedera, we should probably start doing things that are kind of like unique to the network. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100. Like, and I think that too. It's like important to remember that like I think the way in which it's applied on Hedera is unique, but like it's based on ordinals and all these other things out there. So it's like it's kind of already been played out. But what you're saying is like, why not just do it better on
Embrace it.
Hedera? You know, like because it can be
Right.
done better.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, I saw the clip you posted earlier with Rob, and he said, let's mimic what other people are doing on other networks, and I think that that's kind of a winning scenario. I mean, if you look at base and some of the stuff that they're doing, I've been kind of dabbling around with that as well, but you see their marketing, the way they're openly about retail and kind of what they're doing. It's hard not to get frustrated when we've been in Hedera for so long, right? And we're like, hey, can we get something, and it's hard to draw the conclusion about what's going on, like you were saying earlier with the meeting minutes and
Yeah.
the 0.800 with the staking rewards. So I don't know. It just seems like at this point we either need to have some type of like grassroots, let's all get together, blow up the network from the retail standpoint
Yeah.
versus the enterprise. And I had this realization the other day. Hedera is kind of a meme if you think about it, right? We have this enterprise, we're super professional, we're this big Fortune 500, and then you pull up Twitter and what you've got like Hedera retail, which is like this dumpster fire. People's
Yeah.
like, look at us, give us attention. You know what I mean? So it's kind of interesting. I mean, we're almost like I I'm not gonna have a good word for this, but they it, in reality it seems like they don't care about us, but it seems that it's come to light recently that some of these enterprise cases that are coming on are going, where's your retail?
Yeah.
We're not going to be here without you guys. So I'm interested to see how it plays out. I'd lie to say I'd be lying if I said it hasn't discouraged me a little bit, but
Hmm.
we're still here. I did see the Hedera hackathon stuff come up, which I do intend on participating in that
Hell
as
yeah.
well. So I'm pretty excited about that.
I was gonna say I wanted to ask you a question. I've asked a few people this question, but I mean, governing council, if you're listening, I mean, Bones is like you've been in the Hedera ecosystem since day one. I mean, like you were kind of in the crowd like even before we had the token service and before NFTs. Like you've been around. You were one of the first with like the HBAR collection and stuff like that. And so I would ask you, if you were to like really go back and think about where your head was at, let's say back like 2020 or 2021, when the possibilities were limitless and the sky was blue and everyone was so excited on
Yeah.
Hedera. Like if you were to almost like take yourself now and time travel back and kind of explain to 2020 Bones what's happening now, what do you think that reaction would be from back in time Bones?
I mean, it's hard to say. Like I said, I've been around since when I think Hedera is weird, right? A lot of Hedera retail people, including myself, I didn't really dabble that much in other chains. I did some stuff in ETH and some shitcoin stuff back in the day, but my first dive was like I was really sold on Hedera, on the tech, all this stuff.
Yeah.
I think what we didn't realize back then was just kind of how much the network was in its infancy. And we all thought, well, that it's enterprise. You're going to have, and you look at the council, right? Google, Boeing, all this stuff, and you're like,
Mhm.
well, if these guys are here, there must be crazy stuff going on, and there probably is behind the scenes. If there's nothing they're not talking about or NDAs or whatever, but I think we thought that since that was this whole thing, there was going to be a huge retail spike, and we've seen it, with some of the stuff that came out. I mean, we've had the Hedera heat wave, which I think is largely influenced by great creators like
Yeah.
Hangry and Panda, and he did a great job bringing people on board as well during that time. But I think if I had to look back at it and give a start comparison, during that time I was just making pixel art, and we were
Yeah. Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
Twitter DM sales. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's people still here
Google
that
Forms, the Google
yeah,
Form punk drop, like
yeah,
the good
literally,
old
yeah.
days.
And I mean, shit, even how we got started was, I put out some random pixel art online, and someone's like, "Can I buy it?" And I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay, I guess I'll make an NFT," and that's kind of how we got started. But yeah, I mean, it's just, it's interesting to see where we are now. I do, I do wish there was more of the council members building on the network. I know that that's true, that we know that some of them aren't
Mhm.
even building. And I think that might be why there's not as many council members, I guess, being onboarded. Maybe that's a reason why they're kind of
Yeah.
like not doing it. But yeah, it's different now. I mean, I've definitely jumped. I've spent the last 2 years, I mean, doing video game coding,
Yeah.
being a game dev. I'm doing network side of things, and now I'm doing on the Hedera side. So I'm kind of like one stop shop on building a gaming DApp here on Hedera. So we'll see how it goes, but it is. I will say from my standpoint, jumping, I've kind of been going back and forth on, should we just go to base? Should we stay on Hedera type thing? And I've kind of been doing this from kind of an insane standpoint, but to me, what makes the most sense, right? So I've kind of made a DApp that connects with base, and I've used the Hedera side of it with Wall Connect. And as of like, last night, I kind of got all my functionality working with Hedera Wall Connect and all of that. But what I will say is the tooling difference in everything out there for that ETH development side, that base side, it's a lot easier. So I think we've
Right.
got a long ways to go. At least it's easier for me. I can only speak from my,
Mhm.
my standpoint. So what I hope for is, the tooling hopefully gets easier on Hedera. I think what we really need to do, if we're going to see anything, is, we've got to build things that are going to bring people to network and give them a reason to stay, right? Like we saw, I think, to bring back up the heat wave, and sorry, I'm on a rant here. You got to
Go
shut me up
for
if
it.
you
Go
want to
for
talk.
it, man.
I think I'll talk all day if you let me, dude. I think what we saw with Hangry, right? Hangry back in the day, he went on this huge marketing campaign. He got all these guys from Cardano and ETH, and some of these other guys came in. We saw a big influx in network traffic, and then you would see them in these discords and things like that during the time, and be like, "Well, what's next? What's the next launch? How can I get in early on some other stuff?" And we were kind of like, we've got this thing coming up, maybe next month. And I think we kind of fell on our face a little bit. It was great to have the influx of people, but we're such a small ecosystem. And I think for us to succeed, we need things that make people want to use the network, that are unique, like Hashnals,
Yeah.
that, gaming built on Hedera, I think makes a lot of sense from,
Mhm.
standpoint of cost and things like that. There's not a lot you need to do. I mean, that you can't do on other chains as far as like token gating, and other things as well. But I think it's just interesting. I'm curious to see where it goes. Obviously, I want to build here, but I think we're losing. I mean, you can see it on Twitter. I think people are exhausted from being here for 3-4 years, where
Yeah.
they see, like you said, no council minutes,
Yeah.
no 800 staking. And that's part of it too, right? It's like, well, where do you park your HBARs and gain anything?
Yeah.
You gotta go to, the DeFi protocols and things like that, which is, that's being built out on Hedera too. So it's not that we don't have things building. It's just, I don't think we've done anything that's, um, not that we haven't done anything. I just don't think there's enough reason for people to go, oh shit, let's look at Hedera because they're doing XYZ. Let's go take a look over there. But and I think part of that is, developers. I think we're lacking. I think ETH has a lot more developers than we do. And again, I think that goes back to tooling. I think our tooling is a little different and that sort of thing. So anyway, I'm ranting. I'll stop talking.
No, I think you brought up some good points. Like what you brought up for me, and kind of what I think of a lot is like Hedera loves, and the leadership at Hedera loves to quote, things from companies like Amazon and stuff of like
Yeah.
the success. And I think that what Hedera forgets is like why Amazon is so great is they are like self-admittedly like customer obsessed, right?
Yeah.
And when you really look at Hedera as, the reality is Hedera is not a Fortune 500. Hedera is a, small startup that has a distributed ledger technology in beta they're making great strides. But the thing is that when you look at being a startup, you have to focus on your customers.
Right.
And the customers up until now have not been enterprise, and very much so like enterprise is saying to Hedera, you need to focus on retail. And so it clearly, like the broad stroke here that we've learned is like Hedera is very much out of touch with their customers, right? And customers being people submitting unsubsidized paid transactions to the network, bringing more customers to the network. And by not focusing on their customers, that's where the opportunity cost comes in. And that's where they're putting all their eggs. They try to frame it as though they're taking a very conservative, risk-averse approach to Web3, but it turns out that Hedera's approach might have been the most risky approach.
Yeah.
And the evidence is there. We can see the lack of attention on customer needs because, as you outlined, I would say a lot of the growth for this network came from that NFT wave in 2022 and even carrying over a little bit in 2023. And if we look at the development that Hedera put into NFTs at a network level in 2023, the only development that they made was small changes to the fees. That's it.
Yeah.
There was no other changes to NFTs. And so the part that makes me optimistic is, leadership changes, shakeups, the retail community becoming more and more powerful, which I think that this chaos is attractive in some ways. And also like, we're seeing like, dynamic NFTs going live now. We're seeing Hashgraph. We're seeing all these things happening. And I am optimistic about that. But I do think for a lot of people, not having access to a lot of information and, not getting the meeting minutes is like, you
Scary.
get stuck in your head and you go like, is it too late? Is it too little too late? Like, and that's kind of, I think where a lot of people's heads is
Right.
at.
Yeah. And I think when you look at stuff like that, right, you go, okay, well, this is what I think. I mean, I guess I can only speak for me is, you see that and you go, well, if it's just the meeting minutes, why can't we even just approve the meeting minutes? Like what's,
Right.
and you
Right.
kind of laugh about it. You're like, well, shit, and I hate to say it, it kind of ruffles your feathers about everything else
Mm-hmm.
that's been going on. I mean, obviously everyone's been, even myself included, posting about, the foundation and, all that crazy
Yeah.
stuff. I don't want to get into it, but, um, shit, I forgot where I was going with that, but I think that it's if we can just build cool stuff on the network, people obviously will want to use it. But I do think that that just stems a lot of it from marketing. And I hate to bring up base again, but I mean, if you want to look at like users and just kind of the difference and kind of stark contrast, even I think they just finished up their on-chain summer stuff and they had, I don't even know if they had as much, at stake for the hackathon that they're running right now for Hedera or that's coming up.
Mm.
But it's a lot of like, show us what you're building. Here's this is what's coming up type thing. And it's from the top down. They have a lot of uh
Right.
posts and things like that. It's very consistent. And I think I've only seen like one or two posts about the upcoming hackathon. I hope I hope that brings a lot more people because that's a lot of money, 300 grand. I
Yeah.
mean, even some of it's like 45 grand for
Yeah.
for the first prize winners. I'm like, holy shit. I think if we continue to do that sort of thing, I mean, that's the type of ecosystem development to me that I think is going to bring people on board or at least get them interested in the tech, right? Like if at a minimum they said, well, it's kind of the same as ETH and I'm used to building over there. Why would I go over there? You know, at least put a little money at it and maybe they'll build something cool and go, well, shit, like actually I enjoyed this. This was easier
Yeah.
and this worked better over here type thing. So I think we're headed in the right direction, but I think I'll beat a dead horse here, but I mean, it's just marketing, marketing, marketing. I
Yeah.
wish that we could do it. And I mean, I was on the spaces the other day and I was talking with Elizabeth, and bless her heart, we were kind of going back and forth, and she's putting together a big marketing team. And it's like, it's great that they're doing that, but you'd hope that the network themselves would want to market it too, because the price of HBAR matters.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, even like it's also too like to what you're touching on as well with the comparison to base and some of these other ecosystems is it's also like um the pillars that are in place. Like I was talking earlier on the show about like the fact that we only have one bridge, or like the fact
Yeah.
that it took forever to get oracles and we've been delayed with borrowing and lending. It's like you have to have that like startup and go ecosystem for builders, because the reality is it's, and again, the literal president of Hedera, Charles Atkins, said, like, when he was asked the question of, are we going to see enterprise adoption or retail adoption first? He's like, retail is not going to be using enterprise tools. Like enterprise is
Right.
going to be using retail tools, and then they're going to come in and buy the retail projects and acquire them. Like he's like, this is just how technology works. It's like, you have to, like, retail is a necessary step to get to enterprise. So I do think there's that shift in mindset in leadership clearly, but like, when does that rubber actually meet the road and translate into like more bridges, more HTS assets being listed on centralized exchanges and dexes on other networks, more oracles? Like, when does this actually start to click? And I think that that's why so many people right now there's so much pressure on this next 6 months, because it's like,
Yeah.
clearly if there isn't substantial pivot or change or actual more attention put towards Hedera's customer base, then it's like, I think that it's going to be a very tough situation for Hedera at the end of this
Yeah.
year if there hasn't been that substantial change.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, because when you look at this is a Hedera history lesson, right? When you go back down the road, at one point I think Swirlds ran a wallet, right? And then it
Yeah.
turned into like Zact ran a wallet, and then that all that played out, and then all of a sudden Hashpack came and saved
Yeah.
everybody. I mean, if Hashpack hadn't come in and built the wallet, I mean, our ecosystem was like
It would
dead in
have
the
died.
water. And it
Yeah.
was that, and actually that happened twice. That was when Zach came in, it was like, well, what wallet do you use? Oh, it's the only one to use,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the only one that supported NFTs. And then they kind of crashed out. Hashpack came and kind of breathed life into it. But I hope that that kind of shows them, what's out there, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like you said earlier on the show, there's a lot of smart people here who want to build cool stuff, but maybe it's just, give them some leeway, whether it's, I don't know if it's the foundation funding. Maybe in my mind, maybe they start putting people on contracts like MRAC, he's building Atlantis. They've got, Centex, and there's probably a couple other people out there, maybe they start giving them 10 or 20 grand a month, whatever it is. And then they have to meet a certain criteria, or, hey, show us that you're still building things here or something like that. But I think that would give some trust back in the ecosystem to see that there may be some money flowing kind of back
Yeah.
into it, as a part of, as apart from right now, we don't really know what's going on. It's like, that we don't have any minutes from the foundation, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, and I don't want to go on this whole negative talk about it, but it's just kind of like, it's hard not to look at it and go, well, where is everything? Did they take the money
Right.
and invest it in these funds, and then they're going to come back with a bigger bag of HBAR and then blow the ecosystem up? You know what I mean? We just
Right.
don't know what's happening. And I think that, like you said earlier, they've got their big boy pants on, per se. We're a big player, we're transparent. It's the trust layer, but we haven't got it from them. So it's hard to not be a little miffed. You know what I mean? Trying to wonder
Yeah.
what's going on.
Yeah. 100%. And I think too, like the other thing as well is like, um, I don't think you can have a successful startup if leadership doesn't like dog food their own products, like actually use their own products.
Right.
And you can tell that Hedera is a startup that leadership doesn't use their own products. Like the products that are revenue generating products, I don't know if governing board members are doing swaps on Saucer Swap, or I don't know if, the Web3 lead under the CTO's office at Boeing or whatever is, has a Hashpack account that's sitting on the governing council. Like when I look at the meeting minutes and I look at the attendees, I go like, how many of these people are actually using the revenue generating products for Hedera? Or even if I look at the leadership of these different places, like how many of these people are actually engaged in the experiences on the ecosystem? And on the flip side, it's like we got people like Rob Allen, like we've got people that are literally on the governing council that do buy NFTs, that do perform in these activities, that not just because they're goofy or fun, but like this is what is generating revenue for the network. This is what it's paying the bills. This is what it's, you know, giving you your paycheck. It's like, if you have a startup and leadership and the people in those organizations aren't using the products that are generating their startup revenue, it's like, why even have a
Right.
startup? You
Yeah.
know?
And like that's a good point. And I think about this sometimes too. And you can see this on Twitter is that, you know, I think there's like a 50-50 split with people who hold HBAR, right? Because you'll see somebody post on Twitter and they're like, who cares about retail? You know,
Right.
I'm here for the enterprise, 100-year company, you know, all this stuff, which is fine. Like that's how
Yeah.
I used to think too. You know, I didn't really care. I'm like,
Same here.
you know, they'll save us type thing. But the other part of that is, you know, HBAR is a great network. The price action, all that stuff is down, but the actual coin itself, like the reason it's good network is it's not expensive. They, you know,
Mm-hmm.
we don't. I hate to say it, but the tokenomics, like you don't have to hold a big bag to do anything right now. You don't, you
Yeah.
know, there's no community nodes. You're not getting staking rewards, so these enterprises aren't really incentivized to hold this giant bag to force the price up. So you know, you need, if they want that, I think we need retail builders to build these big tools and kind of lock people in on the price of HBAR if they want the price to move. That's kind of where I'm at on it, because at this point it seems like, you know, you look for a reason to hang on to it and it's not there. I hate to say it, it's like it's purely at this point purely speculative. You don't have an incentive to hang on to it. If I'm wrong, correct me, but it seems that that's kind of where it's at right now, and it's kind of sad to see it.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, there are multiple camps of people, and it's like I have nothing wrong with people that are just holding on to HBAR. It's like, yeah, probably they're going
Yeah.
to do well if they're long term investors, whatever. But it's like, to your point, it's like it is weird to see people that are almost like anti-retail. So it's like,
They
but wait, you're
are.
going exactly against your investment thesis. And the other thing too is like the Hedera token service was made, and we have other tokens on the network now that inherit all the good qualities of HBAR that are seeing crazy price action.
Right.
Like we have INOs and we have like all these tokens. Like I was just talking about like Grelf being listed on a centralized exchange. It's like, we're seeing some of this stuff. It's like, it's the same as investing in general. It's like, are you just going to buy a stock or are you going to buy like a slice of America? You know what I
Right.
mean? It's like,
Yeah.
are you actually going to buy a slice of this ecosystem and look at it more holistically and go like, well, like maybe like HBAR doesn't need to like pump super hard in the short term. It's like
Right.
maybe this network has a bit of a different dynamic because some of these project tokens, like again, even Charles Atkins, the president of Hedera, said is like everyone in his career working from, you know, the Federal Reserve and you know, like other Web3 networks to now being in Hedera. He's like, when I talk about people in leadership positions or anything like that, he's like, they got into Web3 through Doge, through meme coins, through BNB, like through whatever. And he's saying that like most likely the mass liquidity that's going to come into this network is like not going to be through HBAR. It's going to be through project tokens from the enterprise level of like, we've got CLSQ that's going to issue their token, and they're a NASDAQ traded company that's going to be issuing a Hedera token. Or we've got, you know, wallets and marketplaces making tokens and even like meme coins and stuff. It's like that, I think, is where the magic is going to start to happen, but it's not going to happen if Hedera doesn't also see it happening. You know, it's
Yeah.
like, do you
Yeah.
see this, guys? Like, do you see what's happening? It's like, no shit.
I know. Yeah. And it's kind of crazy because, you know, and this, I was thinking about this morning too, kind of on your show when you're talking was, um, you know, let's just look at the things that are working, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think we kind of missed this whole, like Solana had this huge run on tokens. You know, Base is having a run on tokens, and we're kind of not. And I think that's a lot in part due to the fact that we just don't have people here that are in the ecosystem, which is fine. But you know,
Well, they can't get in because the bridges aren't there. And we
yeah,
haven't had borrowing and lending. Like 44% of TVL on these other networks is borrowing and lending. It's like we don't have that. Like we don't have
yeah,
those bridges in place because for whatever reason, it just hasn't been prioritized, you know?
Yeah, but it'd be interesting, with how like the way I saw it or see it is, look how easy it is to make a token on the network, right? Like you've got, pump dot fun, these sort of things. Like I think if we had things like that where maybe, we kind of embrace the dark side a little bit and had like these degen tools that just kind of go all out. I mean, maybe that could attract some of the value a little bit, but I digress. I don't know. I guess I don't want to beat a dead horse, but
No, I think it's just calling a spade and being like, if we're gonna be like, whoa, we don't want to go to the dark side of this crypto stuff to make money. That's crazy. We want to focus on enterprise. And you're like, guys, like you got a governing council member that was just criminally indicted. Like,
yeah,
like, come
yeah,
on, guys. Like,
yeah,
let's just get real here. And it's okay. It's okay if someone loses some money or there's like a bad word on the internet. It's like,
yeah.
we will overcome that. We will prevail, you know?
But and I think that I didn't actually hear the news that you said earlier about the it's like 70 to 80% of crypto tokens are commodities, not what's the word I'm looking for? Gosh dang.
The securities.
Security. There we go. But that's crazy. I mean, that
Yeah.
that actually kind of emboldens me. I mean, I've been on the fence about doing a token and things like that, just because you're like, well, do you
Yeah.
launch a token for your project or do you end up in federal prison, type thing. So, it's pretty cut and dry. But if that's the case, maybe regulatory stuff is
Yeah.
is on the up. Who knows? And that could be a huge boon for blowing up the ecosystem.
Yeah. I think for me, similar to yourself, is like, I think that we just don't have access to all the information we can have access to. And I think that commonly we rely on the sentiment from leadership, from people like Lehman or Eric or Mance or Charles or whoever it might be, to give those signals. And the signals haven't changed and the needle hasn't moved. And I think that people are putting less and less value in what those people say and what they promise. And they're putting more and more value on the sentiment of retail. And that's why things are just getting negative, is because retail is kind of like, we're your customers. We're the reason you're in business. And you just haven't, we're like, for me, it's like, it's not even about giving money to retail. Like that's a key piece of feedback that I've received, is like, retail isn't even like give us money. Like retail is just like, can you prioritize some of our needs? Can you remove barriers for us?
Yeah.
And I think that it's just talking about those bare minimums. So I think that I feel optimistic because what I've seen is a retail ecosystem on Hedera that's like, I think way more powerful than they realize. And I think the key here, kind of coming back to the Hashional stuff, is like, can we set aside differences? Can we understand that nobody needs to fail for us to succeed in this retail ecosystem? And can we actually like find a page to get on, or at least if we're
Yeah.
not on the same page, like get in the same book, it's
Right.
like, if we can do that, I do think that, I'm a big believer that the people that use this network will come to control it.
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to my point earlier about Hedera being kind of a meme.
Yeah.
Is you know to touch on what you just said, all all of the enterprise stuff that's probably going to happen is completely not tangible for retail guys,
Right.
right? Like we're not, you probably really can't interact with Atma. All of this token carbon credit stuff that's going on with Deloitte or whatever just got announced.
Yeah.
A lot of this stuff is it's
It's like,
it's
okay,
awesome.
boomer.
Yeah, right. It's awesome. Yeah, it's awesome, and it is like you can see that it's going to be a use case for the network, and it's cool. But then you've got again this like group of maniacs on Twitter that's like, dude, where can I go and where can I interact with this stuff? So I just I think that that's kind of something interesting to look at is, if these guys and these big companies had made the choice to use Hedera, why wouldn't we, right? So, and if they're going to keep the network up and it's going to run and be efficient and safe, all the reasons, why we want to use it, let's build some cool shit here and get it, get it up to where we think it can be, right? And then kind of let the
Yeah.
chips really go.
Yeah. Before I let you go, I kind of want to say like what I take away from this conversation. I think the most bullish kind of thesis I can give as a builder is like, there is the risk to reward ratio, right? And I think that on the outside, I think that it's fair to say that like as a retail builder now is one of the riskiest times to do that in
Yeah.
Hedera, but there also is like the most upside reward possible right now because it seems that the adults in the room are not paying attention right now and the kids are like
Yeah.
they're kind of like left to their own devices. And it turns out that there's some pretty crazy cool things happening, although it's messy. And so I think that if you're somebody on the sidelines that's like, should I be building on Hedera? Should I, whatever? It's like, if you have an appetite for risk, I do think that the upside potential right now of building on Hedera is like immense because I think that we really are in kind of like that lowest valley moment of like,
Yeah.
every sentiment is low, all these kinds of things, but the fundamentals continue to improve. We're getting oracles, we're getting this, we're getting that. The pieces are falling into place. So it's like, if you do have that appetite for risk, I do think that now's a better time than ever to get into Hedera and start capturing that mind share and market share for your project. And I see, projects like Bonzo Finance and H Liquidity and Serial Finance on the borrowing and lending side. And it's like every day it must be like, oh, are we on the right network? Like, what
Right.
are we doing? And so I think that like you look back at any kind of major startup or success story, it's like Microsoft, Apple, Nvidia, OpenAI, like all of these different, like Tesla, like SpaceX, these big success stories that we see, Amazon, like Visa, whatever it is. I think that the DNA that they all share is like they entered an industry or an ecosystem or a market when it was like in shambles. And they managed to kind of like scrap their way through and survive essentially all their competitors. And so it's like, we can go down those levels. They like to say, Lehman likes to say Hedera is in that same position where it's like, we're going to have a bunch of networks and then they'll all die off and we'll end up with 5 or whatever. And Hedera will be one of those. It's like, okay, interesting. And it's like at a kind of micro level on Hedera, it's like, we're seeing that little cycle now where it's like, if things haven't been torn down right now, I don't know how else to define it. We've lost so many people, we've lost so many projects,
Yeah.
but if you survive, I think there could be crazy upside potential, but it is risky.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I mean, and that's kind of what you just said is kind of where my head's at. Like I talked about earlier. I've dabbled on building on base. I've dabbled with Hedera, and kind of for me right now, I at least for my own well-being, right? I'm like, well, you know what? We've been here this long. Let's just ship something that we can put out there that's tangible, and we'll build on the network. And if I don't like it, at least it's a good stepping stone and learning. And if we need to adjust fire from there, we will. But I think that's a good point. Is that the eyes on Hedera, right? If you build here, most likely you're going to get known from everyone on the network. It's a small network. If you build on Solana or base or some of these other things, I mean, you could get lost in the minutia, if
Yeah.
you will, because there could be a bunch of other competitors. I mean,
Yep.
that's kind of a beautiful part about being on a smaller network is, if you're the first guy to do something really cool or be a key player, you're going to get kind of adopted. I mean, we saw that with Zeus when Zeus was really the only
Yep.
market, and then
Yeah.
they kind of fell off. And now really it's, Centex, you got MRAC doing Atlantis,
Yeah.
and some of these other things. So, yeah, it's a smaller, user base, I guess, if you will, right now. But I think you hit the nail on the head is, you're kind of, it's risky to build here. Yeah. But your upside, basically building on Hedera right now is the equivalent of building a shitcoin.
Yeah.
If you,
Yeah.
it could, the sky's the limit, but you could be taking a huge risk down here.
100%. I'll leave it with this. There's a great Paul Graham quote. And Paul Graham is the founder of Y Combinator, which is like the oracle of startups and stuff like that in Silicon Valley. And he basically says, the technology train runs on regular intervals and leaves the station at regular intervals. And he says, before the train leaves the station, usually people have left the train, they're off cowering in the corner, but the train does leave again. And he's like, if you can survive, you may end up with a car all to yourself when the technology train leaves. And so that kind of what that's speaking to is kind of what we're talking about is like, there's a chance that this thing really takes off. And it's like, if you're around, there you go. And the key is just surviving,
Yeah.
The thing that kills every business is running out of money.
Yeah, that's a great quote. I mean, and we'll see. Nobody knows what's going on right now. We're gonna see what
Yeah.
happens, but you got to have conviction somewhere, right? And I think thankfully, there's a lot of hardcore H barbarian guys. I mean, like I said, my resolve's been shaken a little bit, but I'm like, you know what? Let's just
Yeah.
ride this thing. Let's see what happens. But I think the fundamentals are still there.
Yeah.
Why to use the network, that sort of thing, which is why we still have people here. But it's definitely going to be really interesting. I think the next 6 to 8 months, like you said, is going to be huge. And I just hope that we get some some tooling, some marketing, just a little bit of love, and hopefully we'll be doing some cool stuff and kind of get some more eyes on the network.
Yeah. If it's January and I'm still talking about coupons, I don't know what I'm going to do. But,
Yeah,
Bones,
it could be January 2026. You don't know.
Bones, I appreciate you stopping by, man. Like, absolute pleasure. And like, honestly, you kind of still being in the ecosystem and building and stuff like that makes me super bullish.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Well, thanks for having me on. I was definitely, you're a little nervous to come up here, first time caller, long time listener, but appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Take care. Appreciate you. Yeah, honestly, Bones is a legend in this ecosystem. And I would say anybody in leadership or at Swirlds or the governing council or whatever it is, listen to people like this. I mean, these are the people that are building on the network, generating revenue and onboarding people, and have been for literally years. So I would say definitely, like, everyone's got their quirks, and the retail ecosystem might seem a little chaotic, but it is what it is. I mean, double down on it. I'd say. Shout out to Paul. Appreciate you. Yeah, it's so funny. This is a key piece of feedback I get about the show. We'll wind it down in a minute here, but one of the pieces of feedback I'm getting from the show is I felt like a lot of the guests, a lot of people in the ecosystem, and myself have kind of like maybe been complaining and being negative, or you could argue bearish, or different things like that. And I've been expecting more people to be like, oh, you got to be more positive, or, oh, you got to whatever, you're bumming me out. But it's kind of been the exact opposite. It's really weird. Like people have reached out and kind of even, on the show, like Paul, it's like by getting a little cathartic about things, talking things through, being real, pushing on the corners of everything. It's like, it actually makes you more optimistic in a way. And I think that it shows the maturity of the ecosystem and of the network and the community. I think that that's potentially something that can be an additional thing that sets Hedera apart. Is Hedera has a retail community that takes things head on in, a measured professional approach. Like there is like a level of professionalism that the Hedera retail ecosystem, as chaotic as it is, has. Like these people with wacky PFPs and goofy names on X is like, when you really think about it, these are people that have been here for years that I've had great conversations with, that are consistent, and you kind of go, okay, there's something here. And that's a key piece of feedback that people from other ecosystems share, when they talk about Hedera and versus other communities and other networks. They're like, the Hedera community is so knowledgeable and professional and this and that. So I don't know. I think we got something amazing here. Let's try not to fuck it up. And I think that, as we continue on, like I'm pretty bullish. I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be great. But a big episode, guys, big episode. Breadcrumbs are fresh, and we'll see what happens. Deloitte going to become a governing council member? I don't know. Are we, just a bunch of boomers here buying HBAR and, precious metal people? I don't know. Are we a bunch of degen, chaotic, crazy people? I don't know. We'll find out. And thanks. Show's live every Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Hashgraph Enthusiasts, thank you so much, everybody. Hello, future. Goodbye, past.
Thanks for listening to the Hashgraph Enthusiasts show, hosted by Brandon Davenport.
Listen to past episodes and support the show at itsbrandond.com/HBAR.